Hello and welcome back to Blue Ocean, the B2B Inspired podcast. My name's Henrik Arlund and I'm here today with Alan Leigh, CEO from Experieco, one of the leading custom technology companies in New Zealand, who's going to talk about AI in New Zealand from an insider perspective. They've had some really great success stories already. They know where it works and where it doesn't work and where it can go wrong and where it can go terrible wrong, but also where it can be a success and really make a big difference for businesses. One of their big success stories was for Network, which achieved a 50% productivity increase within 3 months and a 35% cost in operating expenses. So, Alan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. That was a reduction in cost, right?
Yes. Oh, did I not say that? Reduction in cost, 35%. Very, very impressive.
Yeah.
So, tell us a little bit about AI in New Zealand today. Where do you see it really working and being a success?
Well, it's a really big topic, right? So AI is showing up in all sorts of places. It's showing up in coding, generative AI for coding. It's showing up in workflows, like agentic AI. And the intelligence to improve workflows, and it's showing up in everyday work and the productivity tools that we use. So we'll talk about some specifics, but what perhaps is an umbrella comment is it's maturing all the time. So irrespective of those three scenarios, you're always getting improvements at a very rapid rate at the moment. Where we are today versus where we were 6 months ago or 12 months ago is very different. And it's improving to be a really useful tool in all of those three scenarios.
And you work with a lot of businesses that are quite complex,
Yes.
with some heavy technology demands, integrations, complex systems.
Yeah. Is it worth me sort of talking to that and just to give context?
Yes.
So we specialise as a business in. Well, we specialise in ugly, is what we say, which is the back-end systems that businesses need to run effectively. And we're talking about typically very large businesses. So an example would be New Zealand Automobile Association or a Downers or over the ditch if you go into Sydney, NRMA, motoring, where they're massive systems that are critical for them to run their business and usually hundreds, if not thousands of users. And very critical for the success of those businesses. So that's what we specialise in. We don't specialise in building a mobile app. We specialise in the bigger, more complex systems that are necessary for these larger, medium to large businesses to run.
So I would imagine AI is quite different within those businesses and those workflows, and different from what most people they know AI from LLM models. So just talk a little about what an LLM model is, and how where you see AI and where you apply that within these businesses.
You're going to test my knowledge, right?
Yes, I am.
No, I think for the nature of the context of what I gave you earlier, these are complex businesses, so they're going to be a lot more cautious, and we're talking about systems that are necessary for them to run. So where we're seeing AI used in their systems is very different to where we're seeing it used perhaps where it's less critical in their day-to-day productivity. But we'll start with the systems. So the systems, what we're seeing is we're seeing a very large, last year and until now we've seen a very large uptake in pilots and POCs where people were testing out what could these technologies do. That example you gave with Networks at the start, that was there was a 6-month pilot for that where people were testing and monitoring to see if AI could improve some of their workflows. And I'll talk to the specifics of that later, but that there's a lot of caution when a business takes on those technologies, and we're seeing certainly for the last 12 months there's been a huge uptake. It would be around 95% of businesses that have dabbled in, to some degree, of using AI to improve processes in their back-end systems. Most of that hasn't necessarily gone into production, meaning they're actually using it in anger to deliver better services or operate more efficiently.
So it's all really just a hype. They're investing.
It's a toe in the water.
And they're playing around, but they're not yet seeing any productivity gains.
Well, a lot of them have seen it put a toe in the water, and that toe in the water is measuring, has this improved anything? So their benchmark is what they're doing today, status quo,
Yep.
and they're running a parallel process or a smaller team actually putting it into practice just to sort of test and validate, is it doing something wildly different?
So that sounds like there's a very low level of trust in
caution. Yeah, caution. So, I mean, where we're seeing it for adoption in systems, like I say, these are very critical systems for businesses to operate. So they're showing a lot of caution from the perspective that they can't just put it into action and hope. They've got to make sure that they have a measurable understanding of how it's improved the business system. And in a lot of instances, that hasn't happened. So, a lot of these businesses have written that off as, well, it's hype. It's not actually delivering the value I thought it would. But one of the challenges we'll get to later is quite often they're using AI wrong. It's not necessarily a technology problem, it's an organisational problem.
Oh, well, talk a little bit more about that. What does that mean? What do you mean by that?
That's how they're using the AI. Like often, a lot of businesses have used it in a way where they're just using it to augment an existing human process or automated process to see if they can enhance it.
And so they're trying to make AI work as a human or replace a human. Is that what you're saying?
Steps in a process, yeah.
Yeah.
But what they haven't explored, and this is again caution, it's not a lack of trust, but jumping to the place where they're fully orchestrating or engineering a process completely differently to what they have today to fully harness AI is a leap some businesses have not been prepared to take. So you're not in return getting or yielding the benefits of potentially doing that.
And is that the way, the direction they should go in?
Some. Yeah, some should. It's all with caution, and like anything, none of these businesses are going to put anything into their business where it's a leap of faith. So, but in parallel, you've got to realise a lot of this technology is evolving rapidly. So the knowledge of how to use it is evolving as well, and sometimes not as rapidly as the technology. So there's definitely those that are getting their heads around it and leading early, and then there's those businesses and individuals within those businesses that are a bit more cautious.
So there's a lot of caution, but talk to me a little bit about where you have seen it, AI implemented today in New Zealand businesses where it's worked well and where it's made a difference. Yeah. What are kind of like the parameters around that, and how do they go around that, making it a success?
Yeah, I think this is AI in a process, not I'll talk to AI in coding separately.
Yep.
But AI in a process and in systems. The example you gave with we had deployed probably 15 months ago now in Detworks. That was using AI to do effectively better categorisation and part of a workflow. Categorisation that a human had done. So they were effectively Detworks, so they were taking on a lot of information. I have to be careful here that I don't sort of breach any confidentiality and reveal their special source, but they were effectively dealing with a lot of data points, and with that data, humans were interpreting it and taking action. Some of those actions and responses might have been an email or a trigger to do some other action. And when you're, in their instance, a debt collection company, they were taking on clients that might have 30,000 customers that they have to follow up. There is a vast amount of information and data points that they've got to interpret and take action. And what AI, we were able to build a system that enabled them to take a lot of that heavy lift out and remove the as much manual as possible, but still keep the human in the loop where it was critical and really important. And an example of that, they were able to take on 50% more clients without adding one more service agent to their call centre.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. So that is, and that translates for anyone who's not a business person, translates to good bottom line growth.
Oh, it certainly does. Yeah, 50% increase in productivity.
Yeah. So that is a great use of AI in a workflow where they didn't remove any cost from headcount, but removed the cost of needing additional headcount. to get to support that growth. So that was a fantastic use case. Other use cases we have seen it really good. I was talking with you earlier around deterministic versus probabilistic.
Yeah, so just talk to me about that. What does that mean? What are the differences here?
Deterministic is where if you have a absolute outcome that you need, a good example is in a finance system, your profit and loss for the end of the month, that is a determined, the variables that make that up are deterministic.
You don't want it to make up the numbers. If it's $100, it's $100.
You don't roll the dice.
No.
So that's deterministic. Probabilistic is where there could be some variance in the data in and the data out.
Yes, so a bit like marketing. So B2B marketing, where most of our audience are sitting, they know a lot about that. Yes.
So for deterministic systems, you're not necessarily getting the big uptake of AI, or if it is used, it's augmenting a very structured, rigid guardrails of code.
Yes.
And or humans in the loop. Where you have a process which is more probabilistic, that's you could jump in fully, and use AI for that, no problem. The consequences aren't the same. And this is what we're seeing at the moment. That will likely change more and more as people's confidence to go up, where for the deterministic scenarios where people want a definitive outcome, they don't want hallucinations or variations in asking the same question of AI and it gives you 3 different answers.
Yeah.
Those systems, you can't have that.
No.
So, but as that matures and the way the use cases are better understood and how that can augment humans and code, that will be used more and more in those systems as well. ERP, a good example, we're in a finance system, an ERP system. Today, if you do a customization, it's coding.
Yes.
It can be configuration as well in the system. But you could use AI in the future where it's within the system and it's helping you, you're prompting it to make some changes and configurations, and it's presenting those to you and you have to approve them. That's a good use case of...
So it becomes more of a conversation instead of technical knowledge, perhaps.
Yeah. So there's a whole lot of nuance to how this could be adopted and used. But we are seeing more and more, there's certainly lots of people using the technologies, but the most important part is success cases, and the success cases haven't been, there's not a lot of poster childs. There's not a lot of people showing really great use cases. I've been to lots of conferences around these technologies, and that's probably the most notable thing is you go, some of the massive global companies even that that may be talking at these events, and these are global technology events, you'd expect them to reel off dozens of use cases where they've made massive, significant improvements for a business, and that was notably absent.
Okay, that's very interesting. So everyone's investing, but not really seeing any ROI yet. Is the yet there, or where are we at?
That comes back to what I was saying, but I don't think it's a technology problem. I think it's an organisational problem, because the people that are implementing some of these solutions are doing it in the same way that they thought yesterday about solving the solution, and that the caution to use AI fully in the right processes has been evident. So I think that will be a learning curve where people will start to test and validate them more than they have. So a lot of the pilots and test cases that companies have been using, they were augmenting what they did and maybe trying to use AI to automate a process in the same way that they may have done it if they'd coded it. It's all very nuanced, but they hadn't seen great improvements. And a couple of things are happening. It's all moving at once. The technology itself has been improving, as well as people's knowledge on how to apply it. So you're now starting to see, there was always some use cases like the one we've referenced that we did some time ago with DebtWorks. You're now starting to see more and more of those as people get their heads around and go, this is how we could harness it. And we're expecting, certainly in the next 12 months, to hear more and more use cases where there has been successes.
Okay, so and the development of AI is that accelerating, or?
Yeah, don't expect it's without getting too nerdy here. It's not. They're not going to try. I think we will hit a ceiling where the amount of training I was going to say LLMs, but some of the AI tools, the chatbots that you can use, things like OpenAI or Claude, if you've heard of those names, those tools. There's only so much training and data sets to train them even more and more. We'll be hitting a ceiling in those. And then it will become about how do you use that technology. And I think we're kind of starting to see that now. So we still expect improvements, but the percentage improvements of training is not going to be as much as what we've seen to date.
Oh, that's very interesting. So are you kind of seeing AI as reading an upper barrier for how smart it can become?
Well, the data sets, yeah. There's always discussion around, and this is getting really nerdy, but
I know,
is that you get what they call synthetic data, which is the AI itself is creating new data sets to learn from. But at the moment, that's, I think, some way away. and whether that is a thing or if that gets regulated or if there's any controls, that's all to play out. But right now, I think the most sort of real world observations are the learning, AI learning more and more from the data that's available is probably nearing its ceiling. Mm-hmm. And there's only so much data it can consume to learn more, and the incremental amount that it's learning is not much. But the biggest perhaps value that we could harness to implement is implementing AI in a different way to get better results of what we have today or what we might have in the near future. And
so from your knowledge and working with New Zealand businesses, if I was a New Zealand business and there's all this hype and everyone's asking for AI and I want AI, what should be my first step? What should I, if let's say I run a reasonable sized New Zealand business with some complex back-end software and I come to you and say, okay, what should I look at and how should I approach AI and what would I get out of that? Would I get productivity gain? Would I get cost reductions?
Well, so let's just start with AI. AI is the umbrella term, right? So
yes.
So that could just be tools for the staff to do improve their productivity. An example of that is write a document better, a presentation better, work with their colleagues. So they can do that today. That's not something we focus on as a business.
No.
And I think everyone's using AI in that context.
I think that's pretty run-of-the-mill these days. Yes, I was at a conference yesterday and that question was asked, how many of you use AI on a daily basis? And everyone had their hands up. But I think they're just using these LLM models, large language models, which is really just helping people writing an email, writing a report, all of those things, which I think is pretty standard now. But that's not really what we're talking about when we're talking about what...
No, for us, it's AI in the use of coding and AI... or what they call agentic AI, which is in the use of workflow and logic in a process. Mm-hmm. And those two are incredibly potent. So on a coding side, there's actually one of the you and I were talking about this the other day too, which is there's from a social media perspective, you've got a lot of hype. And with the hype, you've got a lot of commentators making outlandish statements about how much AI is impacting areas and things like coding or workflow in businesses. And you've got to remember the source. Where is the commentary coming from, and how do they benefit from that? If the benefit's clicks, then they could be making statements that are a little bit far-fetched or outlandish or extreme.
There's a few of those.
If it's a vendor, the obvious benefit is they're the beneficiary of monetising what they're trying to drive. So you always have that in mind. What we're seeing though is AI for coding has improved dramatically in the last month, and it's been around for since 2022, and in the last month the increase in its accuracy and its performance, in particular Claude Code, has just skyrocketed.
Wow. And so this is really February 2026. There was a big shift.
Yeah, it really was, and it was for the type of systems and the complexity of what we're dealing with, you need to have, you can crack code, but if it's what they refer to, if it's useless, it's AI slop. And if you're creating AI slop, you've just got to have a human coming in and fixing it up. And there was, for large complex systems, we were seeing productivity gains of 10, 15%. And well, that's with the latest version. So prior to that, we were seeing 5 to 10%. It wasn't massive. Yeah, if it's a big system, that can still equate to some serious dollars in time. That if you're building a big complex custom system, but it wasn't anything you'd get out of bed and go, wow, that's massive. But for smaller applications, what we call greenfield applications, something that's brand new, it's not modernising an older system, it's just a new idea. We were seeing that's where you were getting much better results. Prior to February this year, it was okay. You could create something. It was impressive. It looked magical, but it needed a lot of work to make it a usable production ready app.
Yeah.
Now with Claude Code having come out in February, we're seeing results there that for a lot of the smaller to medium-sized apps, you can do some wonderful things, and it's workable. It's tidy code. It still needs work. It doesn't. You're not just pushing a button and asking one prompt, and out comes this fantastic app. What we are seeing though is the quality of what it's producing has certainly gone up, and that means you can spend a lot of time more on the creativity of like the problem you're trying to solve, and really sort of focused on engineering a good solution, prompt engineering, and less about the coding. And we're seeing some really good results in that space. The big thing for businesses though, that's actually changing the market. It's making what was yesterday unaffordable in a custom app affordable. So, you could have something that was $100,000 for an equivalent a year ago, 2 years ago, and now that same application enhanced, so even more better than what you'd first envisaged, you could have for $10,000, $20,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
So about 1/3.
It's not $1,000.
No. but it's 1/3 the price, and I would imagine also it comes with a shorter time frame.
That's not a general rule because it will apply to the type of app and the complexity you're building.
Yes.
But it's impressive. So what we've seen there, there's a lot of applications that businesses have wanted, and they've either gone and got a SaaS tool because the cost of building the app they really want, a custom app, just they couldn't afford, or they couldn't justify from a return on investment. And with that dynamic, it's changing that completely. So,
wow. And these are production-ready apps, security,
that cost is
document.
Takes into account all of that, rather than just the time. That's a really good point. It's not just the engineer prompting and developing an app. It's putting the polish on it so you could use it in production.
Yes, and you have documentation for support and further development and changes and ongoing support.
And it's tested for security.
Yes,
and the code is maintainable. Yep.
Yeah.
So doing all that, and sometimes you need a design changes. So all of that takes that into account. What we're kind of seeing there though is that's making, like, when it was just custom applications in the traditional sense without AI coding, the price was prohibitive. That meant that was only a certain part of the market. Very large businesses, typically we'd say over 100 million turnover, that could afford that.
Mm-hmm.
Where their problems were big enough to warrant that investment. With these changes, we're seeing that businesses with 10, 20 million turnover. You could be lower, but for the area that we specialise in back-end systems, that's we're seeing businesses of that size where it's now affordable. And they can, and they're throwing out the sort of weak SaaS solution they may have had, and replacing it with a AI coded custom application, the thing that they really wanted. So, and that's not a hype. That's happening today.
Wow.
Yeah. So we're at that end of the market. We're seeing some remarkable. It's opened up a new market. Certainly, our visibility is New Zealand and Australia, and we're seeing businesses, 10 million turnover and above, removing SaaS solutions out of their business and coding, getting new solutions in. We're seeing them do things that they didn't have an application for, or they operated on spreadsheets and wanted a proper application for. All of that is quite exciting because they're starting to do more and more and more. So the market is growing exponentially.
Wow, and these are custom developed at using AI that effectively the businesses own, and is their custom IP that can give them a competitive advantage. Correct. Either for internal use, benefit the staff, or possibly even APIs and integrations.
All of it. Well, this is where you come to a business like ours. Actually, I've seen businesses do this. The complexity of coding for an application like the applications I'm talking about there is perceptually gone away. People feel like they can prompt in their coding in English because they're just asking in a prompt.
Yeah, so English. I could sit down and do my own little prompt. What if I did that for my own business and I did a little prompt and built my own little app? What could you foresee any problems with that?
Yeah, exactly. So typically you'd prompt something and out, you create an app. First problem you've got is, where is it going to sit?
On my laptop.
Yeah, exactly. On your laptop. So, for a production system in a real business that's going to use that in a secure way and wanting a robust system, it's not going to sit on anyone's laptop, right? No. So it's about, how do I get that to a server? How do I test that it's secure? How do I test that it's actually robust in its logic? And the tools enable you to code faster and create something, but often people don't have the expertise to do the rest that make it robust. So we've seen scenarios already where you've got clients that are creating applications that might be about stock inventory, and they don't know how to stress test the system in its entirety, and they've got carried away with coding, and they suddenly realise, actually, it's full of holes, and the logic isn't right. So they haven't tested. An example I came across the other day was we had an application a client had developed themselves, and it was to do an inventory check in real time around how much stock was in the warehouse. And there was one particular item we focused on and said, well, how many have you got in stock? And he said 1,200 units. And we punched into the system with like 1,400 units of that. And immediately the application said, yep, no problem.
That's no problem.
I'll take your money.
Yeah.
And there wasn't. There was only the 1,200.
Yeah.
So that's just a really light example, but that's what we see happening as well, where the new problem I think businesses will face in that end of town where they're creating their apps is, how do we make sure they're robust? Yeah. How do we make sure we're not just creating other problems in the business, in my customer experiences? We're trying to create these apps to deliver really good customer experiences in that instance to their supply chain, but it could be end clients, and they fail, and then unaware of how to look back through the code and fix the problem. So they can prompt it, but often they don't actually understand what the problem is to begin with. And that was a really simple example. They can be a lot more complex and they'll be a lot more obscure.
So you still need the right human to do the right prompts, and you still need to follow through the documentation, security checks, integration, and all of that, and enable, these are not small businesses, but to have that continuity so that they can evolve and develop that app over time.
Yeah, and what we're expecting is that that's just going to go boom. They're going to get a lot of apps they're building, and to solve all sorts of problems, because the marginal cost of creating the app is lower. But the new problem is, yesterday I had 0 apps, now I've got 10, 20, and how do I make sure they're safe, they're secure, they're not open to hacking? How do I make sure that they work as they should? Suddenly the level of complexity has gone from this was just a manual process to people not actually understanding what the process is that sits behind the code in the system. So that's where we see things will start to shift. What we're already helping some our clients with is not so much the coding at the smaller end of the market, it's knowing what to code.
Oh yeah, so the discovery, understanding the needs, understanding the flow, how it fits in. Yeah.
So if you didn't think like somebody who designed and built apps yesterday, and suddenly you're prompting a few things, you might get the shell of a good system out. But what we've found is we've had to do what we call SaaS rescue, or not SaaS rescue.
A new product.
Vibe rescue, yeah, which has come in and help clients, just understand that in part that what they built was robust and good, but there was perhaps a number of bits that didn't quite work as they should. And we can see if you're building more and more apps, that's just going to be more of that. So already we're talking to a few clients around just we call it continuous development, where you, for a monthly fee, just help them. They might be creating an app, but we're helping them make sure that's robust, it's hardened, and ready to be used in production.
Okay, so they kind of get to play around with, if they want, to kind of build their own little add-on to and changes, and then you come in and ensure that it's fully documented, secure, and it works with the workflow, and you can't order
business system.
You can't order $1,400 of the product that's only $1,200 off in stock. Yeah.
So we can help them out with that. That gives them, we absolutely see a scenario where some clients will vehemently want to do their own and create their own apps. Other clients will come to a place where they go, why don't we just give this to the specialists? It's not about creating the code. It's about what are we designing, and what's the output going to really be. This is a really good system. A critical system. Do we want our best efforts and winging it, or do we want a really nicely designed system?
Yeah, so you talked about this. These are the greenfield apps, so the little add-on apps that just sits on top, relatively isolated, started from scratch, and Claude Code really makes a big difference there. So that all happened in February 2026.
Yes.
How are the AI software development tools in generally evolving this year? What are you seeing there?
Over the next 12 months, we'd expect more improvements in productivity. So if you were to talk in sort of general terms, if you could say for a greenfield app, you might be getting amazing productivity gains. It could be 70-80% productivity gains. And part of that is because it's creating code that and there's no other complexities. You don't have other complex integrations or some complex unique logic or some complex user interface designs. So you can get enormous productivity gains and feel like it's just magic.
For greenfield, yes. But if we're looking at some of the more complex...
as soon as you go up on that scale of complexity, that's when a human is still really good in the mix. So AI doesn't solve that. So critical thinking, creative thinking, those skills are very human, and the AI is not as anywhere near as strong as a human in that. So what we're finding is for smaller systems, we do it T-shirt sizes. So a small T-shirt and a greenfield app, and small T-shirt meaning not that complex. An example would be for somebody who's not into building systems. So an example would be a forms server, a survey sort of tool, or a basic portal that didn't do anything complex, or an app that might be used for some very simple use cases within your business. And those sorts of apps you can build really well, low cost, and the AI does the majority of the heavy lift. Mm-hmm. If you go up to the next T-shirt size, a medium-sized T-shirt, my size, you quickly get into these generally complexities. And the complexities might be there's elements of unique design required that need a human critical thinking and to design. It could be some complex integrations with some other systems and outside of that application that have to be considered. I'm just giving an example. It's not limited to these things, but there are elements that effectively start to introduce complexity. And rather than that 70-80% productivity that you get for the little smaller apps, they don't have to be small, but the analogy, the medium-sized ones will start to, you might drop to 40% productivity gains. These are all guidelines; they're not hard.
Well, that's still better than the 5 to 10.
Yes,
40% is significant.
Yeah. So it's very material as well. Again, we see that opening up a market that didn't exist yesterday. So that's applications where, where businesses, medium and large, typically might have bought a platform or a product and tried to customize it. Yeah. And you suddenly say, why? why would you do that? Because you're trying, you're creating a product that's or trying to bend a product to your will, and there's always limitations to that. Whereas creating a custom application, there's none. You get what you wanted.
So you're saying those two prices are getting closer together?
All of this is pushing the price down for the average marginal cost of building a custom application. So the small T-shirt, that really didn't exist. There was some...
Okay, so now we cater to the little people.
Yep. So that's opened up a market. The medium-sized T-shirt stuff, there was a lot of workarounds to create medium applications, or the return on investment had to be substantial to warrant you building it.
Yeah.
And both those markets have fundamentally changed because AI's impact is it's lowered the cost of building those apps, therefore it's grown the market. Both in bigger businesses where yesterday triage and return on investment, they could afford it, but triage and return on investment meant that they didn't. There was always something more important, and that warranted their fund, their capital. And for smaller businesses, they couldn't afford these, and now they can. Where there's not the same impact is the much larger, more complex systems. And this is where I always, again, when we were talking about the other day, I was saying, be careful about the hype and the social media commentary around AI on all of, like it's a ubiquitous improvement across anything and everything you do, because there's definitely improvements, but it's depending on the T-shirt size, how big and complex the system is, means how much improvement there is. And for big, complex legacy systems, big in my reference is where there's lots of integrations across the business, there's lots of complex logic to perform tasks, there's lots of, really, usually these are systems of what we call systems of differentiation, so they're critical systems to deliver their services and stand out from their competitors. And in those systems, humans, the critical thinking in the architecture of them, the critical thinking in the unique processes to create different experiences for end clients, all of that humans are really good at, and AI is not, so or not as good as. And we're seeing productivity gains on the coding for those systems of that 10, 15. Exceptional could be 20 or 25%. We're expecting this, your question about what's happening in the next 12 months, we're expecting that to lift, all of these to lift a little. So if the top end of town, the really big complex systems are getting, say, 15 to 25% today, we'd expect perhaps in the next 12 months that goes up another 10%. In the medium-sized T-shirt complexity, we'd expect those systems to go perhaps from a guideline of, say, 40 to 50 to maybe 60, even 70. And the smaller systems, they're already at 70, 80% productivity. We think that won't fundamentally, that might improve a little bit more, but it's not as material.
Well, those are some massive changes within the next 12 months and what we've already seen in the last 12 months. So, and really what we can probably look out of that is that, most businesses that are not looking in this area and looking at improving the flow in their businesses, and a lot of that is determined by the software they're using and the app they make available and interfaces they make available both internally as well as APIs externally and to customers, they're going to be left behind. So your view, so you work both with New Zealand and Australian businesses, obviously quite a large range from, mid-sized to large businesses and some of the smaller ones obviously as well. Is New Zealand, Australia, are we up there in regards to where we're sitting, and are we keeping up with trends internationally? Are we keeping up with American businesses in developing software?
I think so. No, there will always be poster child use cases that you hear of some business in America that's done, or Europe that's done something amazing. But putting aside, the outliers, I think as a general rule, we're not that far behind. We are a little, cause there's, you've heard the term number 8 wire, which in New Zealand, that's actually a good thing to some extent. There's a lot of experimentation, particularly at the smaller end of use cases, I'll say, because it's not necessarily small customers. It could be a big customer, but a small use case, and they're experimenting how they could use these technologies. we're certainly seeing a lot of that, and in New Zealand businesses, we're certainly seeing people aren't afraid to play around and do that. We're definitely seeing that at the smaller and mid-market sized clients as well. So I don't think we're behind in any way. I mean, you hear all sorts of commentaries, and one day it could be we are, the next we're not. But I do think, though, most of our, you've got to keep in mind, most of New Zealand businesses, small and medium enterprise compared to the global size businesses.
I know, a big business in New Zealand is probably slightly smaller than the US.
And a lot of those businesses don't have the layers and complexity of global giants. They don't have the resources either, but I think that's actually, in this instance, a good thing, because the friction to experiment and create is actually probably lower.
Oh yeah, and this, I mean, the cost is going down, so the barriers to entry is being reduced, which is great for the smaller businesses because it enables them to better compete with the bigger ones, which used to be able to afford this custom software and technologies. So what you're really saying is that New Zealand businesses, leaders within those, should look at coming up with the idea of what they want to do. So the opportunities are there now. The cost is going down. They should really look at, well, how can I take advantage of this and really just challenge both their teams and somebody like you and saying, oh, this is my vision. I want to do this.
Do you know what I think? And I can see it happening, not as much as it should, but yesterday, it was coders that were creating applications and IT departments. And even though it was to really fulfill on a line of business requirements, so you might have managers sitting, and various managers sitting in a business requesting it, it was a very formalised process. The ability to create ideas, do a pilot or get something just small that brings an idea to life is really low cost now. So what you're seeing more of, but not as much as I'd like, but I can see New Zealand being really well positioned for this, is line of business managers, marketers, operations, heads of operations, even a CFO in businesses where they're not following such a formal process, where it's still within an agreed governance process, so they're not just creating things like skunkworks, but to create something as a pilot and a test is low friction. And I'm hoping that we certainly have offerings out to our clients and to some defined offerings, which is enabling those managers to, in a frictionless sort of process, to ideate, come up with ideas, but coupled with people who know how to build apps to do more.
So really just get these people to think what they want to see, write a prompt for it, get something up that kind of looks something like what they want. It may not work, but it gives an idea, and they can actually take that in and say, come to somebody like you or go upwards in the organization and saying, look, this is what I need for me and my teams to succeed. It'll make a huge difference for the value we can deliver to our customers.
Well, yesterday, because it was so expensive, and bigger businesses in particular, your ability to ideate, come up with ideas and stress test them, and it was just difficult, because if you were a marketer and you have these ideas, if we had a system that did this and I could offer this to our clients, that was a really expensive process to follow, and it was heavy in documentation, and most people can't interpret all the documentation, go, oh yes, I've got all the scope, I can visualize the system. They just don't.
And I know what would happen. The first thing you would meet as a developer, they would be like, oh no, that's difficult.
Well, I know this to be true because I'm a marketer, not a developer. So, I know that a lot of people are visual, so this change in being able to, at a lower cost, create applications so the people that are visual, line of business managers, can see the application, actually enhances it, because as soon as they see it, they go, oh, what if it could do this now or that? Whereas if yesterday's model, where it was on a piece of paper, some lines of scope, functional requirements document, and a lot of people just couldn't digest and interpret that and visualize it. I can see, back to New Zealand business, how we run with it is the ability to create things that we can then just enhance will actually give us, that same opportunity exists for every business across the globe. But I think New Zealand being innovators and being a largely small and medium enterprise market, same with Australia, is that we should really run with that. And I'm hoping that in this next 12 months, what we're starting to see is more line of business managers engaging businesses like ours, or their own internal people, if they've got that capability, to ideate. Let's stress test this, and let's create things. We were talking about some of the innovative things we've seen, being developed, and they're things that you just wouldn't have done yesterday. An example I was giving you was, we've created a tool, an app. Like one of the key processes we have when we talk to clients is what we call pre-sales discovery, and that's when you're talking to a client. They're going, "Oh, this is a problem I've got. I wish I knew how to solve it. Here's the implications. Here's my desired state. Here's what I'd really like," and that's to be useful. That can't just be an arbitrary discussion. You've got to land the plane a little and get the detail. And we've built a application with AI embedded in it as well, and we built the application using AI, and we built that in probably 3 weeks, and we've embedded AI to help in prompting questions along with a human to effectively extract out, well, what's your problem, what's your desired state, and this will then produce schematics of what they've got in the system process design and indicative price range.
Wow.
Yeah. And so now that is something that if we'd done that in the traditional development way only years before, you wouldn't have done it. It would have been too expensive to solve the problem, and you end up using just humans. And that's a use case we can sort of see, just changing. Everyone's starting to go, oh, for those in the know like us, we can look at that and go, wow, that's 2-3 weeks worth of work. Let's create the app. There's large percentages of the market only just catching up and understanding. There's lots of people that have heard all the language of AI, LLMs, agentic AI, and in reality, a lot don't know what that means yet. So the next 12 months, they'll start to see what it means and experience it with people who do know. And I'd encourage anyone listening to this, if you don't know, that's what you want, rather than go and study the terms and acronyms, and it's meaningless. What you really want to understand is, what can it do for me? And that's, go to the people that know what they're doing and get an experience that you'll find that, wow, that just opens up the doors to what we could do.
This sounds so exciting. I mean, I'm so excited to hear all of this. So really what you're saying is that the barriers to entry are being lowered.
Oh, hugely.
It's about creative thinking. Think outside the square. Some great New Zealand Kiwi ingenuity, number 8 wire. Come up with the idea, draw it on a napkin, draw it on a whiteboard, and you now have the opportunity to actually get that developed. And get that applied into your business. That's exciting.
Yeah, it is. The one comment I would say to that is that AI creates code fast. It doesn't make necessarily a great app if you don't asking it the right questions and putting it in the right direction.
No, but I think that's why we need somebody like you and your business may be involved to take this further. But what I'm really loving to hear just is that cost is coming down and it's becoming more accessible for more New Zealand businesses, and they really need to start just thinking more about how they can apply technology because it's more available now, whether they, prompt it themselves and get something up and running as a minimum viable product that may have some security issues and needs some ironing out later down the track. Who knows? But certainly go in that direction, because it'll enable them to effectively compete with much bigger businesses who for years have been developing these more custom apps.
Well, they're in a perfect position, because this will enable, the larger businesses have different problems. They've got to transform these big legacy systems that they've got to change their shoes whilst running, right? So they can't stop those systems and just put a new system in. So they've got to, they've got to do that with caution and be careful. But a lot of smaller businesses sell new services, widen their proposition, really, and are fast at innovating and change.
A lot more agile, able to adjust and come up with new offerings in the market.
And that's what the technology's enabling. So that's exciting. Yeah.
Very exciting. Well, with that, thank you so much, Alan. Thanks for sharing your knowledge today. It was very, very interesting to hear.
Good. Lovely.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Cheers.